This is Slashers. My name is Fardo McShardo because I just accidentally consumed 2 non-vegan candy bars and my bowels are about to plot themselves. With me, as always, are my esteemed colleagues, co-host, and cohorts, Doug and Jason. Say hello to the mutant goons from beyond.
Hey, mutant goons from beyond. We're here for a head splitting of a day, because Jake just ate those non-vegan candy bars, so there's going to be head splitting. I guarantee you.
It doesn't sound fun at all. Doesn't sound. Do you know? Is this the first time you've confirmed that you've broken vegan rules since you've been?
I mean, it happens at like dining out and stuff, or
Sure.
people will buy me something. The one that really annoys me is when something changes its ingredients. But like we were talking about, so it's this brand. Little Secrets that I found on Amazon. I specifically searched vegan Three Musketeers. It's the first fucking listing. They have a graphic that specifically says it's dark chocolate, not milk chocolate, and then it's not vegan for multiple reasons.
What is dark chocolate vegan?
Sometimes. I mean,
Okay.
if you go to like Hershey's, the only kind of vegan chocolate they have is the syrup. Everything has like something, but
Sure.
usually you can find a vegan dark chocolate, and that's something that a lot of other companies use. So I'm leaving a review that says thanks for the butt squirts.
Well,
Did you guys?
what's the brand of that again? Big Deborah's? Is that what they're called?
Little Secrets, but
Oh,
Big
Little
Deborah's
Secrets.
works
Okay.
too.
Yeah. Okay.
Do y'all remember when sugar-free gummy bears apparently used to give everybody like awful diarrhea like 2 years ago or something like
Is
that?
that like the era
yeah,
of
it
the
was
Wow potato chips?
probably, yeah. I
One
just
of my
remember
all-time favorite Simpsons jokes is Homer going, "Oh, Pooh, you got any of those chips that make you have to go to the bathroom? I got some spring cleaning to do."
That's like those black burgers from Burger King. Remember when they had that for Halloween and gave everyone like green shit?
Oh, the Nightmare Burger. I remember that.
They interviewed people like locally here on the news, and people were like, yes, I turned around, and they're talking about their shit on like 8 o'clock news. Yes, I turned around and it was green. The whole toilet bowl was green.
Wow, Southern California sounds lawless.
Yeah, I love it. And on the news, when something breaking, I remember in the COVID when the coronavirus stuff was going on, they played the Spanish channel here. They stole Metal Gear Solid's music. It said coronavirus, and it did dun 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 dun. And I'm like, that's Metal Gear Solid music. What the fuck?
I saw a thing the other day which was positing the question: can you beat Metal Gear Solid without taking a single step? And so somebody was like shuffling where you can move forward without actually taking the animation of one step. So he was just kind of shimmying forward. I didn't have the patience to watch all of it, but it was a very interesting idea.
Which game? Which
I think
Metal
the
Gear
original
Solid?
Metal Gear Solid.
Oh, the one- okay. Wow. Where everything would just kind of you had to sneak up on everything and it would just like startle and run after you. I remember that.
Yeah. I never actually played them all. I played the Game Boy Color one and liked that a lot, but then yeah, I got on the PlayStation bandwagon a bit late because I got like a modded one, and by then I was already N64 and then PlayStation 2, and a lot of my gaming was always just like very scattershot. Now that I'm like into retro gaming and stuff, it's just so weird the things I happened upon and the things I like. Like so often I like the worst entry of a series, which is charming, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's like everyone loves Twisted Metal 3, right? Or is that a controversial take?
Or what Castlevania 64. I remember everyone hated that one.
Yeah, Superman 64 was good too.
Ugh.
I like
Impossible
those
to
rings.
beat.
I
Isn't
actually
that
like
what-
that game.
I thought it was like impossible to beat.
Yeah, it was fucking stupid. And I used to tell my friends like when they come over from school, I'm like, all right, you got to play this game, and they all turn around like, let's play something else. This sucks.
Something that's fun. This is not fun at all.
Well, you know what is fun?
What's that?
Tonight's movie.
Oh
Ooh.
shit, he brought it around town.
Yeah, brought it around town. This is a movie now for you guys out there that are talking about like nostalgic and retro. Here's something that a filmmaker who loved nostalgia and retro, well, basically blood and gore and splatter movies, and made it into one. And nowadays, that stuff that's kind of like spoofing all that those movies from the 80s. Now this movie is being spoofed to this day. Censor. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but anyway, we're talking about Evil Ed from this took like 5 years to make. Was it 1995 now?
Yeah, I saw
Yeah.
that. It took a long time for them to, I guess they were like stealing 60mm cameras from like some archive.
Yeah,
Oh.
that's actually not a bad way to do it, because they shot on 16mm, and what you do with that, you can call companies like Kodak and some other ones and say, hey, we want to test drive some of your films. So they would collect all the sample films and splice that together. So yeah, this movie was made on a stolen film reel.
Which honestly, I mean, when you take the timetable, you take the subject matter, you take the censorship, it's kind of funny how similar this is in a lot of ways to Bad Taste. I mean, Peter Jackson spent an eon making that and ended up somehow getting government funding and kind of playing fast and loose with what he said he was making and stuff. And you look at this, and this is in direct conflagellation of censorship rules at the time and for free. I mean, this is as punk rock as I think you can get in a Swedish horror comedy.
Sure. And I wasn't even aware that Sweden had strict censorship rules back in those. You always hear about the video nasties in the UK, but I didn't know Sweden apparently had similar rules for like violence and sex and movies and stuff. I just think everybody in Scandinavian countries are just like laissez-faire about everything. Like, it's too cold up there to be worried about this kind of thing. That's how I always assumed it.
Yeah, let's huddle up, watch a movie under the covers, maybe a little jerkin gherkin when you see the pseudo gremlins lady gremlin. It's all good.
Oh yeah, that's Fridge Fritz. I got a picture of her right here. I think that's
It
her.
looks
Maybe
like
I misgendered her.
Gina Davis from Beetlejuice and the female gremlin Greta had a baby.
Ooh. It even says bright light when they open the fridge.
Exactly, right?
Yeah, so that's referencing the Gremlins. But yeah, so this film too, it's funny because this is another one that I rented as a kid. Maybe when I was like 12 or 13 at the library, and they had this for you video people out here. There was a few different covers of this. There's one where he has like a skull face and he has like the editing scissors in the film reel. And then there was this fucking cover where a guy's getting his head split in half with an axe. And that was really fucking brutal. And the funny thing is that tape is the R-rated censored version. so yeah, if you want the one where his head split in half, that's the censored version. If you want the one that's uncut, the boring cover where he's just standing there.
Interesting.
Yeah. Because this is one they had both copies there. And the funny thing is, I keep going off tangent, but I'm sure some of you guys like nostalgia out there. But when I was really young, I think I was like 6 or 7, and my aunt, she used to smoke cigarettes all day. And it's like, hey, scratch my back and I'll give you a quarter. And she had Evil Dead 2 like on a VHS tape with like 3 other movies in EP mode. And I remember seeing it for the first time, like when Linda comes through the hall with the chainsaw, and then Ash chainsaws her head on the tool bench. I never knew what the cover for Evil Dead 2 was. I only knew it because it was like a blank VHS tape. And then when I went to the video stores, I saw this guy with the head split. So I always thought Evil Dead 2's cover was this.
Oh, okay. I could see that.
So there's something for you. I know it doesn't lead to anything, but just a little thing in the nostalgia banks.
When I was little, I thought that Dead Alive and Evil Dead 2 were linked. I thought that like Dead Alive was what would have been Evil Dead, and Evil Dead 2 was like the sequel because of the graphics where it's the lady pulling open the mouth and there's the skull inside, and then Evil Dead 2 is the skull with human eyes. That was just me being a child and going, oh, that's the Skull movie. But lo and behold, they're just kind of adjacent.
I remember that Skull Evil Dead 2 mask used to really scare me when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It was just very, very like I was like, I can't watch this movie. This movie's got to be the scariest thing ever. It's not. It's actually quite fun. Like, but at the time when you're a kid, when you're a kid and you see that cover, you're like, this has to be horrifying, absolutely horrifying. I cannot believe it.
Well, that's what I thought this movie was too. And then when I turned the back, like on the back cover, like there's a little screenshot of it's just a guy cutting the severed arm with a knife. I know it happens for like 2 seconds in Evil Ed the movie, but yeah, it's just that picture. So I thought this was like gonna be the goriest movie ever made, like the most brutal and sadistic. It's like a guy's chopping up a severed arm already, making bread slices out of a severed arm. So, and then you get the cover like this. I'm like, holy fuck.
Yeah, and then by the end of it, I mean, you're getting into the wackiness where the little doofus who's the delivery boy is like spitting out chunks of glass after falling like 3 stories and then just gets up and prances away. So it literally gets that very, very cartoony kind of more Evil Dead 2 tone. I would really love to see this movie's equivalent of like an Evil Dead 1, though. You know what I mean? Because Evil Dead 1 was very serious for the
Mhm.
most part, and then 2 got like silly. This movie already feels silly. I wonder what this movie could be with a more like visceral tone and like a real descent into madness, maybe some occult nonsense, a Necronomicon on celluloid, if you will.
Maybe more Jacob's Ladder a little bit.
There you go. Yeah, just
Yeah.
like a little bit more like overtly demented. And I love in this movie they do it a few times, not enough in my opinion to be the theme of the movie, where he's like having what's clearly like a hallucination, right? An hallucination, depend. I've heard both. Where it's like, this is what he's seeing. It's a nurse with great tits and a miserable face. Oh, but what's really happening is it's a doctor with great tits and a normal face. But it didn't happen enough times where it was like ping ponging back and forth, where that was just like the movie. More often it would happen, and it was like, oh, that was just kind of odd, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Or like when he's looking at the neighbor who comes out and she's
Oh,
under underwear.
good God.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then, he realizes it's just, your 70-year-old or his boss's 70-year-old neighbor
Oh,
who
this
has the
70-year-old
only,
neighbor was true to her roots because she was the only one with a Swedish accent.
yeah, I was about to say
Yeah.
she was the only one that wasn't, dubbed over, it sounded like. It did feel like it didn't bother me. Like a lot of times I watched dub, but this one felt like I was watching like an Italian movie. Or
It
like,
felt
like the
very Italian.
yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Or like even like not just like horror movies. Like if I was watching like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly or anything in the Dollar trilogy,
Yeah, of
it
course.
felt very Italian to me. Like it's just, straight overdub. I don't know if it was because of 60 millimeter. I know
Yeah.
a lot of times the shutter's too loud to really record, so they'll just go in and overdub it. But yeah, it's very, very Italian. It's very European. Um, has anybody seen Delicatessen or The City of Lost Children?
Yeah, both
Mhm.
actually. A
Yeah.
Delicatessen, the guy who directed that, he directed Alien Resurrection.
Yeah, and Amelie, I guess, is probably think he's most well known for because Alien Resurrection is its own little ball of wax. As
Hey,
everything,
there's
as
some
everything,
brilliance in it and some just amazing things to ridicule.
absolutely, absolutely. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's funny too. Like this also felt like a less, or actually a more goofy and more self-aware version of like Rabid Grannies, because that was like Belgium.
Yeah, very
Sure.
similar.
It's just weird how they all like it's a European film and it just kind of feels, I don't know. There's like a European touch that American films just don't get. Like
it's kind of like a Monty, like a Terry Gilliam Monty Python thing.
Yeah.
Because that kind of animation and that humor style. Because it's a very funny movie. It certainly reminded me of Brazil a little bit as well. If you guys have seen that movie,
Exactly. Well, because especially there's lots of parts in Brazil where it's very tongue in cheek at people who are regimented and methodical and like this big machine.
sure.
Right. The machinations of like how life can be structured. And so much of Ed and what makes him funny, kind of absurdist element is just like he's so straight laced. And so yeah, I got that vibe too, actually.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I was reminded. Now I've seen this movie before. I think it's the second time I've seen this movie. I watched it. I remember I think I rented it from the Alamo Draft House before the pandemic. And I remember watching that and I was like watching, I thought this is cool. But then the first one now I'm kind of like, okay, I'm gonna watch this movie, gonna take notes and analyze it. I was like, this is just really because it's about a guy who's dealing, like you said, the machinations of the machine essentially, and it drives him crazy.
Yeah.
Literally it drives him crazy. And I was kind of and it also looked and felt a little bit like Baird Munchausen or Brazil,
Yeah.
those 80s Gilliam movies that I'm a really big fan of.
Especially the up close, somewhat Dutch angle.
Oh yeah,
very,
absolutely.
like severe. That was one of the things that's really interesting about this movie. It's a movie about film editing. But there were times where it was like, please change the shot. Please do a B shot. Like, please something to diversify what's going on. That was like my one kind of frustration that made some of it feel a little long in the tooth because it's right in that kind of 90-minute sweet spot. But there were just some of those points where it didn't do very well. Perhaps it was successful in the fact it made me appreciate the choppier, more aggressive editing and more vivacious kind of stuff. But yeah, I do think there's some parts that feel like they drag. Doug, is that a fair assessment?
That is a fair assessment. Actually, even when I was younger, the part that drags is right when those two guys enter the house with the Uzi.
Oh my God, nothing
that's the
happens,
part
yeah.
when even when I say like, okay, I could go make a sandwich or something. Yeah, it's like 15 minutes of them walking around the house in like the dark. I know the house is never, the lights are never on in that house. Even though the guy Sam Campbell, who looks like discounted Joe Bob, or Squidward. I always say I look like Squidward. Yeah, Sam Campbell too. There you go. There's your Evil Dead reference. But yeah, honestly, my favorite part of this, like I love like the where he's like editing and going crazy with the visions and stuff. But my favorite part of this whole movie is the third act in the asylum. So that's
It
always
turns
been my
into a straight action movie at that point, to be honest with you. Now maybe I feel like they could have tightened up because there's parts where like the SWAT team's walking around the asylum. He's got the girl, and then the delivery boy. He's kind of like running around the asylum. It felt a little aimless there for like there's like a 5 to 10 minute part where I guess they're trying to ramp up tension a little bit because he's about to kill the girl, but it just kind of felt like they're walking around in circles in the asylum. That's my biggest gripe about that part, but it's still kind of cool when they do finally start shooting each other, even though everybody in this movie has the worst aim for a shotgun possible.
Well, you want to know
You
what's
just
funny?
kind of have to point in a general direction and shoot a shotgun. You don't have to have
Yeah.
like
the fact that it lightly grazes his cheek. I've literally seen cat scratches from domesticated animals that are less severe than, or I guess, excuse me, more severe than the face scratches he gets from the shotgun to the face.
yes, and it was literally point blank range. You're not missing somebody with a shotgun.
Maybe he filled it with salt. I don't know. It was like a salt shotgun.
Like the Winchesters in Supernatural.
Yeah, but I've always used to watch this on VHS, but I have the that Arrow Blu-ray for it. One thing I noticed watching it in like HD is that when they're walking around with the shotgun and stuff, like Ed when he's getting his arm and everything, spoiler alert, when he's getting his arm and head blown off, everyone's wearing earplugs. Like you can see the orange and the green earplugs.
I watched this on Tubi, but I didn't notice that at all. No.
Yeah, it's like in the climax, like everyone in the room's wearing earplugs, like the girl laying down, and then Ed has it in one shot. I'm like, you can see the green and the yellow.
Doug, have you ever? Now you've been on several movie sets. Have you ever worked with blanks? Are they like that loud? Is that everything?
Yeah. Well, M16. It was an M16A2, but yeah, the blanks are loud. Basically, they're just bullets with nothing in them.
Were you on the set of that Alec Baldwin movie? Was that?
I wasn't there. I wouldn't want to be there.
Clearly not.
No.
That's Doug's official statement. I, as his attorney, have coached him in this regard. He will not submit to rumor and innuendo. He knows nothing. Let's move on. But yeah, one of the things I think that's really interesting modernly, for safety reasons, I see a lot of independent filmmakers using gas-powered airsoft guns and then just using After Effects to do muzzle flash and stuff like that, which, you know, depending on what kind of budget you have and depending on what kind of resources you have, can be very effective. The Corridor Crew guys do a really great job on YouTube of showing like muzzle flashes. They do a really good one where they redo the muzzle flashes from John Wick with like really good accuracy.
Oh, wow.
So, and that's one of the things that I think I really love about digital content creation at this point. I mean, look at the things I've edited from my fucking phone or my like shitty work laptop, right? For this show where I'm not getting paid, where I'm just doing shit for fun. And imagine if this was like my calling card and this is all I wanted to do with my life. I like to think that I've used some kind of innovative techniques and like with the way I've done chroma key and stuff. And it's cool to see other content creators do that. There was actually a really cool thing I saw where some African kids were literally just using cell phones to make action movies and using chroma key and using, you know, overdub and doing all the editing literally just from a phone. They weren't the best movies, but the fact that they even tried was so ambitious. It was awesome.
Yeah, I mean iPhones now. I mean they shoot commercials and there's like, oh yeah, it's completely shot on the new iPhone. You know, now granted, there's still more technique, more talent, and their other stuff that they're probably using that's other than that. But apparently, I mean iPhones. I know what was it that was it that Tangerine movie that Sean Baker made about that was completely shot on his iPhone. I'm just like, this is it doesn't it like Doug knows it doesn't the cost of entry to making a movie now is way less than it's ever been before. Now, because of that, is just constantly nothing but content constantly, which can, you know, bring down everything. But I mean, it's now, Doug, is this movie your spinal tap? When you watch this movie, do you have like editing flashbacks of just like, oh my God,
I do. Yeah. Well, anyone who edits knows that. Even editing the podcast, you know, I'm sure it's like, and you gotta like get
when
that
you
little...
hear Bill Mosley's voice 50 times, I'm like, oh my God, this is exactly what it used to be like.
Yeah, it's molesting time. See, okay, and here's another funny thing too for those people that saw the shit. Well, the Shit Eater's coming out soon, but the Trash Juice, I had no idea. Like I watched this movie so much as a kid that I kind of acted out that way as the Bill Moseley character in this. And
Yeah.
I watched something. Holy shit! I did
I
take
could
it
hear
from
that
this.
in your voice, man.
Yeah, like ooh yeah. Well, it'll cost you an arm and a leg. So
That's one of the beautiful things about like wearing on your sleeve your references, right? There are so many times where I would listen back to older episodes and I would hear like I could hear the content creators that I was following at the time. I could hear the dude from Toy Galaxy and hear my inflection somewhat being like that, or obviously like Joe Bob or any number of people. At a certain point you're kind of ashamed, but the other part is like it's so cool to see a direct impact of the things that you're immersing yourself in. I love it. Like honestly, this movie, especially this film, being a mosaic, a pastiche of a bunch of different films, I think it works out really nicely, and especially for you, where your film is itself a series of vignettes, I think really fits this as well.
yeah, and so you never know what seeps into your subconscious. But as much as this movie is funny, I'll admit, even watching it again recently the other day, there's some really creepy shit in here. Like that guy in the asylum, that monster. It's like, Edward, yes, you must teach them a lesson. Yes, very good, very. Like I always thought that was fucking creepy. Like it's well shot. It's in an asylum. It's the guy when he says, "Come a little closer." That always gives me chills. It's effective.
Yeah,
Well,
or
good.
No, okay. Well, the like you were talking about creepy things, like the nurse at the end when he goes to the asylum, where she just like pops up into the screen, like that always gets me. I mean, I've only seen this movie twice, but that got me both times I was watching this. There are some pretty effectively, like it's a comedy more than a horror probably, but it's it does have some really effective creepy moments, and it's certainly a character study more so as a plot driven movie.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is you don't see that in horror movies really ever. Oh,
Well,
you mean
it's so
psychological
interesting
things?
because this is like the tour de force of an actor, right? Like this is something where it's a lot of it is basically a one-man show for Ed. You almost wish that you could have seen his performance in his native Swedish, right? Because clearly English isn't his first language. You can see in the cadence really is what it comes down to. Even if you want to take your East Coast or our West Coast, sure, there's a different rhythm. But what they're doing, there are sometimes where just the words just don't make sense in the way that they're inflected and the way that they're even just phrased syllabically. And so I would almost wish, even if it had subtitles, just to see how he would, orate those sounds. Like it's kind of like Menomina from the Muppets, right? I don't know what the fuck that means, but I have an idea of what it means to him. And that performance, if he was dubbed over, I don't think would be as good. So in terms of things that we do like, let's focus on that. Jason, what's like your number one from this film that you're just like, wow, that was a pleasant surprise. I love this.
The thing that I completely forgot about, which I was really like, this is really, really cool, is when the producer comes to his house and that whole scene where he's like going over the editing style, he's joking about any fever rape scene. And then he like runs away from him because he's going crazy, and then he turns into like the literal devil from Legend, essentially.
It's so good.
That whole scene and that whole thing is like really, really, and all of a sudden he breaks his neck, the devil's neck, and then it just immediately cuts to him being the producer and not the devil anymore.
Yeah.
I was like, this is really, really cool. This is very like cool, very confident, very showy filmmaking at this point. Like I really, really enjoyed that. He's like, we're having a race to the bottom of hell. Like this is awesome. I really, really enjoy that segment right there. And it literally does look like they just took the devil from Legend and just painted it white.
I always thought Ed would be a good
look, yeah.
chiropractor too. The way he puts his hands up, it's like he does it perfectly. I'm like, I don't mind getting my neck cracked that way. So.
And Doug, what's like your number one for this film?
Oh, okay. You want to be honest? Like I do love I love the character. The guy who plays Ed is really good, but I mean, it's gonna be weird. But you know what always sticks with me? The score to this movie. The music to it. That's what always like. I love the music. Like sometimes I'll throw this on in the background just so I could kind of hear the music to it. It's weird, but I really do like the score to it.
Well, it's good, and even its parody is good. When you're doing the Mexican standoff, the kind of good, bad, and the ugly Ennio Morricone, riff, even that is objectively good. Honestly, as I'm watching, I'm like, oh, I see what they're doing, and then I listen with a little bit more of an attentive ear, and I'm like, oh, this it's actually still good though. It's not just bad parody. You know, like sometimes you get into like your Scary Movie 4 and it's like, oh my God. Like, or which Halloween is it where the cops waddle like penguins and you're just like, okay, I get that it's a joke, but this is not a joke.
That's Halloween 5. That
5,
one's just really, really bad.
Look at that.
You're
Well,
just like,
see,
what the fuck?
it's like the music's in there, but I like the score to it. That just that like it's weird. I like weird shit like that, and the music has always stuck with me ever since I first seen it. So yeah,
My big one, the thing I like the best, and I know I had used tits earlier. I did not mean to be disparaging, and this has nothing to do simply with the fact that it is a large-breasted woman. I really like that, you know, him grabbing the lady, her having the demented face. That demented face is great. The illuminated eyes, objectively great. So often when you see an exaggerated human face, your brain goes, I know what that is. You know, you see the fucking kid from Mask and you're like, that's clearly like makeup, right? Or like Drop Dead Fred, where he's got like the pancake head. You're like, oh, I know what that is. But this is so good. Like, honestly, I felt myself kind of believing it. Like I could see that just being a warped version of her face. So good.
yeah. The gore in this is really good too. And for the video people, this is what he's referencing.
It's so good.
Yeah,
it articulates where it needs to. I mean, honestly, I have seen huge budget films that tried to warp a face that weren't even half as good as that.
Yeah, so there you go. See, work on a film like that, and you'll be talking about it years from now here. So you like I said, the whole gore shootout at the end, like he gets his hand blown off, then his elbows blown off, and he gets his head blown. The gore in this is really good. It takes itself seriously near the end of it, I think. Because there's a few,
but not too seriously, where it's like trying to have a message or something. That would have really been eye rolling.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's just the middle finger to the censors boards, essentially.
Exactly.
Which is always a cool punk rock thing to do. We have the MPA here, which gets upset about the most trivial things. I always hear directors complain about. I remember Kevin Smith was talking about how he's had to like appeal like 4 times for to get an R rated from I think Zach and Miri and Clerks too. He had to have appeal for them not NC-17. They were like just nothing jokes. That was just like absurd. And it's like, who's going to go to see Clerks 2 and get offended by it to start with? Like nobody, some churchgoers aren't going to, ooh, Clerks 2, that sounds, I really enjoyed the first one, especially those, drug dealers outside the front of the quick stop. Like
or the part where the lady fucked the dead guy.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That was hilarious. I want some more of that, please. Yes.
It's for your Oscar consideration. Another thing too is like I know they parody it or like make it like a joke. It's like a movie from The Simpsons, like those parody movies in The Simpsons. But
like a Treehouse of Horror, yeah.
Yeah, well, not even that. It's like when they're gonna say, "Oh, it's like blood-sucking vacuum cleaners from this planet." They're going to see that movie. But Loose Limbs. So they played the trailer for Loose Limbs 5 when they're like he's like the doctor. I would watch those movies. I thought those movies looked like I would be
super
the person.
Fun.
Yeah, I'd watch
chopping off the foot and everything.
Yeah, I got big Dr. Giggles vibes from that doctor scene.
Oh,
and then of course, and then the parking lot scene that they showed a little bit earlier when he was first kind of editing was also very funny.
Well, the parking lot scene is super like that's what I love, gore and sleaze. Like when he's like drooling all that stuff. He's like, well, yeah, but I would prefer an arm. I love that stuff. So that's the kind of
one of the things that's great about the movie within the movie is that it is regarded as trash, and it is trash. So really, we're talking about a guy who has a very sensitive predisposition. Like he's just a delicate person, because if this is going to push him over the edge, there's an argument that he would have gone crazy and killed people anyway. So I really like the vignette style, the fact that it does show like kind of behind the curtain, you see this miserable little man instead of like the great and powerful Oz. Because if it was something that was as nefarious and ominous and intangible as like the Necronomicon, I think that it would lose something, because it would inherently kind of try and be serious, whereas this, I think the joke is like, this is stupid. Like the fact that you're censoring this stupid stuff is also stupid, so it works on layers.
Yeah, well, what did you guys think about the cold open? I always love the cold open to this here too, with the guy going crazy in the editing room. So
super good.
And they punctuate it perfectly, but after he's blown his head off, he just points at him and says, "You're fired."
That's
Like,
so fucking funny.
yes, I love it so much, and it's like, the stereotypical shitty producer, just firing somebody who he's been run clearly has just run into the ground from editing all these just sleazy movies that he apparently made $100 million deal on. Which, I mean, good for him, I guess.
Yeah,
I just
that's
that
some
cold
Marvel
opening
money.
is, yeah, exactly.
It's like
And that
early
is
Charles Band. That's kind of what it was. So
Yeah, with this movie, another thing that I think shows is like post production is so imperative to what we do now. You know, setting yourself up so that you have good shots, so you're getting the best angles. Because, like, for instance, the face that I love so much, that's in what, 20 seconds of the entire movie, and it's really well done. But in order to do that, that took pre-planning. They knew the angles, they knew how rough they could be, they knew what to do. And so I think that the fact that this took so long also does help the quote unquote craft of it, because then you can get that kind of, you know, the bang for your buck. Like, if you're going to make this your money shot, you have planned it, you have done it. It's almost like an Ocean's 11 style heist by the time you're actually pulling it off.
Yeah, I mean, that person had to sit in a chair probably for like over an hour, for several hours probably, to just get ready for that one shot. That was like, 2 seconds maybe tops, but
Yeah.
it's like one of the most memorable things in the entire movie. It was so worth it. That's what I love about these kind of movies. They know what their money shots are. They know what's going to be taken up, but they've got to plan out everything. And of course, they can't. And it's a cheap movie, so they can't do this over and over again, because it takes, the more time something takes, the more it's going to cost them to come out of their budget. And they can't just keep calling up Kodak for free samples.
Well, and that's another great thing when it comes to, I think we can all agree, we've seen enough horror films to know a strangulation is a cheap cop out, a neck break is a cheap cop out, striking someone who's off, out of frame, cheap cop out, right? This movie does, I think, each of those things, but they do it in a reversal. When it comes to the choking and the neck break, you've actually used good effects. You're not doing it in lieu thereof, you're doing it to do it well, which is crazy to me. Like, I just watched American Gothic. We did it for this, one horror movie a day thing, which, again, Jason, thanks for coming up with the list, because that was really fun to follow along.
Yeah.
But in that movie, there's like one of the more disturbing kills is when one of the brothers kills the girl by like breaking her neck, and then it's implied that he makes whoopee with her corpse. But the fact is it's the cheapest kill, so it's made conceptually better by the horror of the necrophilia, but it objectively is not terrifying. And I've seen so many movies, and that one really made me think about it. Like, okay, I guess they at least tried to add some set dressing, but so often when I see that, I'm just like, ugh. But then this movie was like so refreshing, and maybe it was a good bookend to the other.
No, well, I do agree, but now the funny thing is, there's this Blu-ray has two cuts of the movie, and apparently the director likes the new special ed edition. So it's but it's like longer than the one that's the original cut. But if you watch the special edition on the Blu-ray one, there's scenes that were cut, like gore scenes that were cut, and they're reinserted in here, and they're actually really good. Like, there's head exploding, shotguns. It's just more montages of him like watching different the rest of the Loose Limbs movies and editing them. So you do get like a bazooka to the head. You do get all these shots that they never used for the original cut.
Oh, did he kill the kid and vacuum out his brains? Is that what I heard?
Yeah. So that's in there. Like, there's just a lot of this is almost like Terrifier 2, where there's so much gore that you kind of forget of the different pieces and parts in there. But there is a longer scene with the wife and the daughter that go to the house where he's at, and he's just kind of like taunting them. Like, that's in the original cut, but this one's even longer. Like, he's trying to stab his daughter with scissors, and then she like hits him with the frying pan or something, and he drops the scissors and it goes through like his foot. So he's running around screaming, he has like the scissors through his foot, bleeding all over the place. And then she pushes him out the window. So I mean, like, there's a lot more to it. So that special edition one is the longer cut, but there's a bunch of really good snippets of gore. So, like Jake was saying, how long that mask thing to make, and it's only in there for like 20 seconds. Well, the special edition one has more shots of that gore that was never used.
Yeah, and
I think that even helps with the comparison to like Bad Taste, right? Where it's chocked full of good content, where you're just like, it feels full to bursting. And I might want to invest in that special edition, because I, like Jason, watched the Tubi version, which was great. Short of the few lingering shots, I wonder if I, thinking about like my skills as an editor, if I could chop those down, stuff it up the rump with the extra stuff, how good I could make it. But
Yeah.
Ed did a good job.
No, it's good. I really liked. So I couldn't sing this movie's praises enough. Like I said, there's slow parts in there. Now, a question for you, because I've always referenced it to this movie, but is this line from a different movie, or like where he's like where the one crazy guy, he's like scratching himself, he's like my doctor says I'm schizophrenic and paranoid and someone's always after me, and then Ed says that line to him. He's like just because you're paranoid doesn't mean no one's out to get you. Like, I'm like, that's a good line. Is that stolen from another movie or something? I feel like it is.
Funny enough, that sounds eerily like the conversation Jason and I were having about Barbarian, because we were talking about Bill Skarsgård, and I was like, it's not mutually exclusive. The fact that he is victimized doesn't mean he couldn't have victimized someone else. So that's weird. Matrix cat walking by twice in my brain. Thanks for that, Doug.
I always like that line. It just feels like it's something from like an Oscar-winning movie or something.
Use that in Shit Eaters too.
Yeah, the shit eating. So.
Maybe it's in 12 Monkeys. That's the only thing I could think of. Remember a line would be like that from the, when there's talking. Sounds like something Brad Pitt would say in 12 Monkeys.
Yeah, well, I don't know. And then there's another shot too, like when he looks like a pizza guy, the one that brings the films to his door, and Ed's like he's wearing his like sweater vest, and he's like flicking his pencil ring in his hands, and then he's like, you just need to relax, man. And he's like, I'm perfectly relaxed. Like, I just feel like that's like a line from another movie, or if it's from this movie, kudos, because it's memorable.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that he does. I saw like one of the trivia on IMDb was like most of Ed's quotes are one-liners from movies, and I'm like, I don't think that that's true. I wouldn't say it's an overwhelming amount, but I think that they're delivered that way. Like, it's almost, there's a game in improv called Last Action Line. So you get an item from the audience, right? So it's a pencil, right? And so Jason would be the host, and he would go, okay, we're taking a pencil. So then everybody is lined up behind, and then whoever has the bright idea comes up, and they mock that they kill that person with the pencil, and then they do like an Arnold Schwarzenegger like shticky line, like get the lead out or whatever. It was delivered kind of in that way, which I think there is quite a lot of overlap between that quote unquote like Last Action Line Arnold Schwarzenegger bullshit and like a Freddy Krueger. Like, frankly, a lot of those lines are very, very similar in their kind of wit and almost fourth wall breaking.
Stick around from Predator.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Oh, yeah. My biggest gripe with this movie too is the sort of his wife and kid subplot is very underbaked. Now, I read there was a lot more to it.
Well, it's in the special ed edition,
sure,
so there's a lot more of her.
Yeah,
like, you're ruining your daughter's birthday party. I'm like, look at me, I'm all bloody, and you want to complain that I didn't make cake.
Now, Doug, may I ask you, the extra content in a scene like that, is it worth it, or is it just kind of more of the same?
I don't think the wife was a very good actress, like portraying it. Like in the special edition one, when she's like going around, she's like, what is this? You edited this whole movie and it just has only the sex and violence in it? And he's like being creepy, and then she's not really reacting like you would react to that. Like, don't grab my daughter. You grab my daughter, I will kill you. So I don't know if she like puts it. So is it worth it? Maybe it's kind of like The Room acting with her.
You'd almost wish that she had that parallel, right? When it comes to what's the demented version of her. We have the devil guy. We have like the cartoonish Coraline mom doctor. I kind of, and I wish that it was a more consistent theme, because I do think that the idea of playing in like the nether realm, like what's that Nightmare Ned? There's the world, then there's the world as he sees it. Would have been fun, especially for a character like that, because poor acting in that regard would kind of help the situation, because that kind of unreal nature, if that makes sense, like it feels, unreal. It feels surreal. That's the word I was looking for.
Well, maybe they were going for that, because it does feel kind of like a long take of like a David Lynch movie where someone's just not reacting the way you'd expect them to react.
Like the beginning of Mulholland Drive, where you don't know anything that has nothing to do with the
Yeah,
rest of
or
the movie.
what's the one where he's in the bathroom and like he kills the mom tries to get him killed because she doesn't like the boyfriend. Oh, it was a Wild at Heart. That's kind of what it reminded me of, like Bobby Peru and like those slow shots of someone reacting to something not the way you'd expect them to react. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Um, Now, do you think maybe she's acting poorly, or could it just be like poor overdub?
Maybe it could be poor overdub. So, like I said, that old lady probably had the best accent for like when I hear that old lady talking on the phone. Give me the police. I'm like, ah, yes, I forgot this was a Swedish movie.
Yeah,
So,
and I wonder also in terms of pacing if that would help because sometimes, especially when you're dubbing, and I've seen this in a lot of giallo films, and Italian specifically, where they are clearly and slowly enunciating their mouth because that's what's really the acting, and it just so happens their body's doing whatever and they're doing the blocking, but they're slower because they know somebody has to come in later. I wonder if you punch this up like a 1.1 speed, if that would help a little bit of it. You would dub it in like a regular voice, and then you would just have that speed so everything seems a little bit tighter if it wouldn't feel so weird.
like a Beastie Boys music video.
There you go. Let the beat drop. My son's still obsessed with that intergalactic video. So when they're in the like subway station and they're like freaking out, I think about him all the time.
I miss him. I've got that Beastie Boys book, and it is quite the read if you haven't gotten around to it. It is really good.
No, I haven't read it.
Yeah, it's really good. I can't believe.
Awesome.
So I wonder, like, how do you guys remember all of this that happened back in, like, in 1988 we were doing this and this and this? I was like, how do you remember this? I don't remember what I did last week. And you've done like constantly way more things than I've ever done. How do you remember this?
I think a certain degree of it comes to like the fact that their life is noteworthy. Like I listen to podcasts and interviews or read documentary or watch documentaries, read biographies of like old pro wrestlers, people who've been occupationally hit in the fucking head, who could be like, oh yeah, we were in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was a dark and stormy night. I was wearing Daisy Duke cut off shorts and one butt cheek was hanging slightly lower than the other. And then I'm like, well, I'm sorry, what the fuck? Like, what? Like, how many concussions have you had and you can tell me this?
It's very true. They do have a whole chapter about them apologizing for the giant penis on their first tour. And then they're like warning you, it's like, hey, when you first get your first like big tour, just make sure you just reel it in a little bit. Because if not, you may be in 2022 or 20 whenever the book came out in 2018, still paying a storage shed in New Jersey of a giant inflatable penis.
Hey, they remember it though. So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So I now have you guys seen that movie Censor? It's on Shudder.
No, I've never heard of it.
No, well, I haven't watched it myself either, but I think Mikey was saying like he watched Censor and he was explaining it to me.
2021 film.
Yeah, it's new, and then he's like, oh yeah, this editor goes crazy because they have to censor the violence in the movie, and it's an editor. I'm like, did they remake Evil Ed? Like, is that what?
Oh, it's a Magnet film. Magnet films are some of my favorites.
Yeah, well, hey, there you go. Now they got a lawsuit against Evil Ed now. I don't know. It just sounds like the exact same
It's on
plot.
Hulu as well for free.
Yeah. It is?
Oh, well, not for free. It's Hulu if you have Hulu, I should say.
The Astron 6 guys also made a movie called The Editor, and it's the whole thing's to send up the giallo movies, and it's pretty good. It's a little too dry in spots, but it's still really funny.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's really funny, but I can see some people think it's a little too slow. But you also, if you've never seen a giallo movie, you probably would also be like head scratching a lot.
Yeah, that if you don't know what it's making fun of, you don't realize how good the craft is of what it's doing. It just looks cheap.
Yeah, it's a little inside baseball, I guess you could say. If you don't, if you're not exposed to that, you really wouldn't get a lot of it.
Yeah, that's like for fans like, oh god, the shots are so similar to like Inferno or Opera.
So. Yeah, exactly.
That's one of the things that's really interesting when you're doing homage work. I don't think a lot of people realize, because horror itself is a genre where people are like, oh yeah, it's cheap to make and you can get a good yield on your return for it or whatever. When people are tossing it up and trying to do an homage of the original, I think a lot of people who are uninformed go, oh, it's just like a cheap thing. And then the people like us who are like, yeah, it's the reference.
Yeah, give us some of that good reference. We love it.
Yeah.
Well, see, now I wonder. Okay, let me ask you a serious question here. Now, for people who, okay, let's say like general public, like ones that are like, oh, the scariest movie I ever seen was The Conjuring Part 2.
Funny enough, my new paralegal who just started with us, we were talking about horror movies, and she was like all excited about her horror plans. Like, what's your favorite? She's like, The Conjuring. I was like, okay, cool.
No,
I know how far I could go in this conversation. Cool. Let's go.
yeah, it's like, oh, really? Well, okay, so here's a perfect example. So your person that you got, if they were like, say some old lady rented this movie, she'd say, oh, I used to love The Exorcist back in my day. That was my favorite movie. And then they watched this movie, not understanding the 80s splatter movie references, like Evil Dead 2 and Brain, or what's the other movie this movie Gremlins. Well, that's not really a deep cut.
Well, I mean,
But
they have like Critters posters and stuff. I mean, there's quite a few things if you keep your eyes peeled.
Cherry
yeah,
2000.
but some of the
was
intense
hilarious.
gore and stuff, like they don't really, they're like, what is this? Like, I'm just not understanding any of this. Like, would they enjoy this movie, or do you think it's more for the fans of like the splatter movies and stuff, that like the ones where the baseball cap backwards and like, yeah, man, look at that blood and gore in the tits, yeah.
So if I can be so bold, when we started slashers, one of the big jokes was that we didn't do a slasher forever. Arguably, our first slasher was Candyman over a year into the show, right? Which is fine. I love slasher movies and I love truly gory movies. I've always been a horror comedy guy. I mean, I think it's the best thing in the world. And what I've realized, especially as I get older, horror comedy creeps people the fuck out so much more than just horror. Because if you go to a normal person, you go, hey, this is Motel Hell. It's fucking hilarious. And they look at you and they go, I'm sorry. So they cut their vocal cords and they put them in a Cabbage Patch and they turn them into jerky. I'm like, yeah, it's awesome. And they go, oh, and then you realize, oh fuck, like I am a horrible freak. And so a movie like this, I could easily see somebody being more offended by than something that was overtly horrifying, like overtly horrifying, like a Conjuring.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
for
like,
sure, absolutely. The Conjuring. See the Conjuring, and they're not bad movies. I mean, the first two were fine, but they're very much crowd pleasers. They're very much mainstream horror.
I call them
Um,
NPC movies.
NPC movies. Why is that?
It's just the general public is like, oh, this is great. My favorite movie is It from 20 whenever that came out, the new one.
But this movie is for the genre fans. You know, people that don't really care about horror movies. I don't think are gonna, or like the casual fan
Like
maybe.
the ones that call Michael Myers. They're like, Michael Myers, the guy at the hockey mask.
Yeah,
Oh,
that
God.
kind of thing. Yeah, like that's not. They're not really going to enjoy this movie so much. They might think this is just a little too weird. And I know some people will probably get distracted by the overdubbing as well. Um, but you know, it's not. It's made for it's made for genre. It's made for fans of the '80s, splatter punk movies, especially that kind of thing. Movies like Intruder, which you also did last month, which is
Love
a
it.
blast of a movie.
Fuck, it's so good.
Yeah, it's so good.
People
Um,
like the fact that people sleep on it just blows my mind. And it's like, yeah, I could go completely off the rails on it. Like I love that movie for so many separate reasons. And like for reasons I love this one, like the Ted Raimi, like I went off on in my little review. It's so perfect. Like he is just this character. And it's just this little vignette that takes 10 seconds each time. But doing that stupid 10-second investment makes the actual kill, which is boring. It's a cleaver to the back of the head, and then the headphones fall off on either side. There's
yeah.
no gore. That's a very cheap effect. It's very attainable, but it feels like a fucking orgasm after you've had somebody tickle your balls with their tongue.
So, Jake, would you say I'm just crazy about that movie?
And then the ending, fuck, that ending is good. Where he like frames them. I mean, sorry, where something happens, and if you haven't seen it, oh, whoops.
Well, I mean, if you see, I mean, you guys have, that movie came out in the 80s, but the killer in that movie is the hillbilly guy from Evil Dead 2. So there you go.
Yeah.
And he looks like a NASCAR fan. That mustache, I mean, that tells you he has one hobby. Well, maybe two, maybe three: beer, domestic violence, and NASCAR. Okay, there you go.
Free mustache rides too.
The trifecta of NASCAR fans. I don't know.
Well,
I'm
he
from North
dresses
Carolina.
like someone. He always reminded me of like a character from King of the Hill. in
Oh
Intruder.
yeah.
Like it's like the high-waisted jeans with the cowboy boots, and he's got the beer gut that hangs over, and he puts the belt around his beer gut. So,
Yeah, and it's fun because like the earnestness that he has when he's talking to them and everything. I don't know, it's really well done. It's a super fun movie. The set's perfect. Clearly like that was a movie that I think was born of necessity. I think somebody was like, hey, I have this shooting location, what can I do here? And that's
Yeah,
something that works so well.
Yeah, I think it's didn't Charles Band produce that movie? I think it's like pre Full Moon, maybe kind of Empire. Like,
yeah,
or maybe
because there's like 2 releases of it, one from Full Moon and the other one from Synapse.
oh,
But
okay.
basically, for you people listening out there, Intruder is kind. If you've seen Evil Ed and are listening to this, then Intruder is like a real version of the Loose Limbs movie.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh,
No,
absolutely. I didn't think, but
totally,
yeah,
for sure.
absolutely. Also, it was kind of fun when you sometimes I don't know if the version you watched was like this, but the one I was watching, you would see him editing, and the machine he was editing on, it was just like a blank screen. Oh, like that's kind of cool. You just hear stuff like, but you can't see what he's actually editing. So all you're just imagining like the most messed up stuff that you can't show in Europe, I guess. So that was like I thought that was a cool little like aside. That you're
Well, it's the
not
best
seeing.
of both because you have that where your imagination can run rampant, but then you do have the vignette where you do get to see the silly stupidness.
Oh yeah,
You
absolutely.
get,
Yeah,
I mean, either or taken on its own would be a cheaper version, right?
sure.
And where this one has both, and you kind of have to, tiptoe on the edge of bloat and too much content. I think it's done really well because it's not relying solely on you, because that's something that I think we can all agree. Like Barbarian, for instance, the first 50 minutes is relying only on you to do everything. And then there's one bit of visceral action. And then the next 20 minutes is relying on you to do everything. And if the whole movie was that, it would be good, but it wouldn't be wow,
Oh yeah.
And so I think that you do need to have a little bit of the payoff. You can't just tease the whole time.
Yeah,
Oh, for
because
sure.
well, I mean, are we going to spoil that movie right now? Because I could
No,
just
no, we won't spoil that movie.
don't
Maybe
spoil Barbarian.
yeah,
Yeah,
don't spoil. It's pretty new,
I
so it's
do
not.
want to do a full review of it. If you guys have time this week, I'm happy to come back and do it anytime, because I think that it really has enough substance to be talked about, like in a full length episode. And also, I think there's enough to talk about when it comes to like the nature of a comedian doing horror. And there's a lot of
Sure.
comparisons going on with Get Out, and people. I think Georgina Campbell even said that Zach Krieger and Jordan Peele were very collegial, and there's a lot of Jordan Peele's DNA in this. I think that would be fun. So we'll do that. Put a
Yeah,
pin in it.
that would
well,
totally. And I think everybody on the show has seen it by now, so it wouldn't be a hard time to get people scheduled together for that one.
and that would make sense to your analysis, Jake, or your hypothesis of comedy making good horror or making it more disturbing. So it just, I don't know. Because a comedian made Barbarian, I thought that movie freaked me out. Actually, I saw it in the theaters.
Well, and I think that's one of the things is it's absurd. What happens in that movie is absurd. Like, you could easily see that being a joke. If you tone down the severity of it and you make it just this inane thing, maybe you take out some of the incest or whatever. I think you could have a very like, it could be a Whitest Kids sketch, but it also is really interesting to me because that was something born out of a concept, right? Zach Krieger wants to do a writing exercise where he shows a woman bypassing these red flags and keep going in a conversation, right? When we're talking about Intruder, you have a strong concept in that, the film. Evil Ed, you have a great concept in the idea of censorship, because even if Evil Ed fails, it succeeds a lot of time. It's a great way of doing a movie where you're laughing with it and at it, and either way you're entertained, so the filmmaker wins. At the end of the day, disliking this movie is very difficult. I could see if you don't like the movie, but to actively dislike it, I think would be very hard.
I could see not getting it more so than not liking it. Like, I'd
That's
see
what I
like
mean,
somebody,
yeah.
I could see somebody like sitting down with like a buddy and be like, whatever, not for me kind of thing. But as far as somebody like, this is awful, awful movie, I couldn't see anybody saying that for it at all. No.
Yeah.
No, it's great. Maybe at these horror conventions, we'll start seeing some more cosplay of people dressing as Ed. So there's like 4 posters to this movie. There's one I really like. It's kind of funny and stupid, but if you Google it, it's the one. It's Ed and then the mummy guy in the insane asylum. They're like it looks like a buddy movie, and they're like standing back to back with the scissors, and it looks like there's a fucking elf movie that Jake you mentioned and we watched. I'm like,
Oh
this
yeah, Norm the gnome.
Norm the gnome,
Gnome
yeah,
named Norm, yeah.
a who with a Norm named Gnome. So
A gnome named Norm.
Hold on, I have it. There's is the poster.
Oh, there we go.
It's like a white background. Ed and the mummy guy are like standing there, so it looks like a '90s buddy movie. Like
It's or like a sitcom where they just adopted a daughter, and there's like they're telling her all the ways about growing up in these hard streets of San Francisco in the '90s.
It's like you thought you went to a bad bris. Check out Evil Ed with these scissors. So,
there it is. When I was looking at the picture of the gal from Evil Ed, I realized it reminded me of Fright Night, but like better.
yeah, with a big toothy grin.
Which not to say that Fright Night's bad, but just like this is that next step up of craft, in my opinion.
Yeah, so there's a lot to see, and especially now. I mean, Halloween's over, but this is more of like a movie for like a film editor, a filmmaker, or someone who just likes the way movies are made. Like, I think this is a movie for you, or like even podcast editors, editing with sound. You know what I mean? Just hearing the same thing over and over and over and over again. So,
Or you're staring at, you can see from just a time signature, you can tell exactly that's when someone's saying probably Jason's saying I know that.
What'll be great is when we edit out the ums for this, and it's just you saying, it's Jason saying, and then laughing at yourself.
That'd be an inside joke for everybody in this one.
I don't think we edit the ums. Do we? Do we edit the ums?
I will if
I edit, but I haven't edited in a while, so I don't give a fuck what y'all do, because if I don't have to edit anymore, it's fine. I realize how much I over edited looking back, because like I hate a lot of podcasts where, like, for instance, like when people will make a snorting sound or have a high sibilance, I really can't handle it. And so I would always take all those things. Dude, I used to hack up some of Brian's words, and I would find like a consonant syllable from an earlier word, copy it, and replace one where he had done one of the things where it's like blah or blah and I needed that consonant sound, and nobody fucking knows. Nobody gave a shit, because all it is, if it's not distracting, that it's bad. It's just a conversation. So when it goes well, it's still just a conversation. So I realized I squandered hours of my life editing this shit. So I felt very much like Ed. But and to Doug's point, I don't think it's just editors. I think if you do any kind of mundane activity, I think if you have kids and your kid says the same fucking thing 15 times, there's those certain like droning elements of your life where you could like feel the hourglass and the granules just dropping as he's looking at the screen, that I think could articulate to basically anything. I think it makes it a little bit more universally appealing than some of the other horror comedies.
Well, Jake, that's why you got to scare them. You got to show your kids the Brave Little Toaster and say, you want to know what? If you're bad, we're going to go to the junkyard.
Dude, my wife was like, oh yeah, why don't we watch Brave Little Toaster? I was like, are you sure, buddy?
It's not that it's good. I love that movie. I loved it as a kid.
Well, I'm trying to con her into letting me show some other stuff. She was almost like down with Monster Squad earlier because we watched Hocus Pocus. I asked her, like, really, Sierra, is it that much more severe? Yeah, it is, but still, it's
well, have them watch Brave Little Toaster. Just say Doug was the bad influence.
There's nothing like so did you have to explain to your kids what a virgin was?
Oh yeah, but that's the great gag with the second one where he says a virgin's just somebody who's never lit a candle. Exactly what the fuck I said in the first one. Fucking exactly the first thing I said.
Yeah, well, just say, well, she's not olive oil, so there you go.
Huh. So yeah, in terms of content you'd like us to do, please send us ideas as far as stuff at slasherspod@gmail.com, at Instagram at slasherspod, anywhere. We love it. I love delving into things that I either have a vague familiarity with, a movie I haven't seen in a while. Evil Ed's a great example. Intruder's a great example. There's so many movies that I think you can find accessibly. That's one of the things that's always been, if you've ever submitted a request or recommendation to us and we haven't done it, I'll tell you plainly, 9 times out of 10, it's not that we don't like your idea. It's we want our audience to be able to find this stuff easily so they can follow along. And so stuff like Evil Ed, stuff like Intruder, American Gothic, pick. Those movies are so easily accessible. I think we've tried to do that all through October, and we want to do it moving forward. And so there's that. Douglas, you have shit going on. Why don't you tell us about your shit that's going on?
No, the shit eating or okay. Anyway, but yeah, so you guys can Trash Juice is done. It played at the theater, so Jake and everyone from the Slashers podcast, Jason, Aid, Mikey, Micah, Jesus, everyone was a fucking thing. But yeah, so that's going to be coming out to Blu-ray shortly. I'm just working on that right now. We submitted it to Tubi, so we had to get the subtitles made and everything. That's always fun. That's Evil Ed in real life, sitting there going, "Oh my god!" Like just sitting there like that. But yeah, you can check us out on B Movie TV. Jake hosts Saturday Night Terrors with Yahira sometimes, so it flops in between. I'm on Friday Night Action at 8 p.m. And yeah, so you can check out Trash Juice and like Father Like Daughter. Those will be playing occasionally on the channel. And for those who wanted to see Evil Ed, it's on Tubi, but I strongly recommend the Blu-ray, because you get a whole booklet, a bunch of cool features, and if you really like this movie, there's like a whole other cut to it. So
Arrow put it out, right?
Yeah, Arrow put it out. Check it out, because it was like on sale for like $17 at Barnes and Noble. I think it still is. So
nice.
And it's worth it to be in your collection, because I think it's very inside baseball without being like, how people make fun of like Rick and Morty, where it's like, oh yeah, like the audience thinks that they're so smart for getting the joke, but it's actually like very much like a lowest common denominator. So it's like, yeah, everybody gets a fucking joke. I feel like this movie is like a good version of that, where it's like everybody can get the joke, but it's not smarmy and self-absorbed, where people are like,
yeah,
right?
and it's like some 400-pound guy with neck beard and like his hair and his greasy glasses saying, "Oh, Rick and I'm so good because Rick and Morty makes me so smart. I'm smarter than half the population," while he's slamming his Cheeto stained fingers on the Reddit forums complaining about stuff. So
I think it'd be 4chan, but yeah, I think
4chan, yeah,
still
4chan.
pretty accurate.
That's kind of what the Rick and Morty fan base turned into. No offense. Well, you could tell the creators of Rick and Morty I said that, because that's how I feel.
Honestly, I gave up on the
but
show, and like I've wanted to go back every so often, but it's kind of like like South Park. When I was in law school, I stopped watching TV, and then when I went to go back to it, because it wasn't topical, like the references were kind of lost, and the fan base got kind of just shitty. Where I was like, I don't really care about this anymore. So, if you have any good, I guess, obtrusive or offensive comedy, send it our way. Maybe we can get back on a new bandwagon before it is annoying. Offensive, good; annoying, very bad.
Lower Decks season 3
it's
coming
so
out sometime.
fucking good. It is so good. Have you watched it?
Yeah, is season 3 out? Is it been confirmed?
Yes,
Is it out? Okay.
So yes,
right. Yeah, because I watched
is
first 2
so
seasons. It's really
fucking
good.
good.
Yeah.
The
It
incel
is-
fan base hasn't gotten to Lower Decks yet, have they?
No, well, that's the great thing about Star Trek is a lot of Star Trek fans will pick and choose the content that they like, and that's totally fine. Like for me, for instance, I have a big blind spot when it comes to Voyager. It's not that I disrespected Janeway. I think that Kate Mulgrew's fucking fantastic. I think the cast is good. It was just at a period of my life where I was just picking and choosing my content a little differently. So you find people who are just like, okay, this doesn't offend me, I just don't need it, and it is so great, because I am a huge fan of Star Trek the animated series. I think it's some of my favorite media. When I used to have a Twitter before Elon, my Twitter bio said that I was from Beyond the Farthest Star, which is the first episode of Star Trek animated series. So Lower Decks takes place in the animated series universe, which has like a different continuity slightly. And so like there's some you look in the background and you're like, oh my fucking god, that's my childhood. But it's not like trying to beat you over the head with it. Like, look how clever we are.
My favorite joke, and I think it was the first season or second season, when they had the statue of Cole Meany as to being the most important person of Starfleet. I was
So
like,
funny.
yes.
And now that we've excluded Doug thoroughly, Doug, why don't you send us on home, bud?
Okay, well, I hope you guys all sit back, relax, and enjoy Evil Ed when you watch it. If you watch the movies after the podcast here. But anyway, this is Doug signing out. We want to say goodbye and good die.